Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing another recent reads reviews where every 4 to 5 books I will take some time to do little mini reviews of each of those books so that my monthly wrap-ups aren't 1,000 years long. So let's get right into it. I do have 5 books to talk about, the first being a manga, which is going to be Sailor Moon Volume 1. So, like probably many of you out there who grew up in the 90s, Sailor Moon was my everything. I loved Sailor Moon as a kid. I wanted to be one of the Sailor Scouts. It was just a whole phenomenon that everyone loved Sailor Moon. So I was so excited to finally dive in and read the manga, and I am happy to report that it was so much fun and I loved my experience so much that I gave this 5 stars. Now, this does follow the TV show almost to a T, which I was pretty surprised about how loyal the TV show was to the original manga. And these special editions do feature some colored artwork, which is gorgeous. Overall, if you loved the TV show Sailor Moon growing up, this is like a must-have. It is so much fun to revisit these characters, these stories, and the one thing I will say that I did notice reading these stories as an adult is they are very young. So don't go in expecting this mature and complex and very deep story and characters. You're not gonna get that. Some of the dialogue is super cringy. Some of it is really, really young, and this is definitely targeted towards elementary schoolers, which is how old I was when I originally read it. But I will say that just the experience of revisiting a childhood favorite brings back so many nostalgic feelings that it's just a comfort read at that point, where if you're in a bad mood or you just need to escape for a while, there is nothing like revisiting your childhood through a story. So I highly recommend checking out Sailor Moon, the manga, if you loved the TV show as a kid. And if you didn't love the TV show as a kid, this probably isn't for you because of how immature at times it is. But those of you who will appreciate it will love it. The next book I have that I finished was The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I gave this 5 stars. So I started off loving The Fellowship of the Ring, which most people find is their least favorite, and I still gave that book 4.5 stars. I loved it so much. I loved the characters. I was shocked because even though the writing style isn't my absolute favorite, the characters really, really make this what it is for me. And I do have to say that the creatures and just the imagination involved in this world is so much fun to get lost in. And you just really appreciate what Tolkien did for his time for the fantasy genre. You just see all of those elements that modern fantasy series are taking inspiration from in this book, and it's just so much fun to explore this world with these characters. My favorite characters, I think, in the book itself, I still love Sam. Sam is like the best. I love Sam. I also really like Frodo, which is shocking to me because I don't remember liking Frodo like as a kid when I watched the movies, but I really like Frodo in the books. And once I finish this whole series, I'm gonna do a deep dive review into the book series as a whole, and then also comparing it to the movies and like kind of what they did right, what they did wrong. And I'm really excited to do that. And I will talk more about Frodo in the movies in that video, but I really like Frodo and Sam and their adventures in these books. And then I still love Gandalf. Gandalf is just the best, and I love Legolas and Gimli. Just like everything about this book is so much fun. So I'm a huge fan. I'm shocked because I didn't love The Hobbit, but Lord of the Rings totally got me. I'm hooked. and I'm so excited to read The Return of the King now. The next book I finished was one of my 5-star predictions, which was Recursion by Blake Crouch, and I really enjoyed this, but it wasn't 5 stars. I did end up giving this 4 stars. So Recursion follows 2 different perspectives. One perspective being an FBI agent who is starting to investigate this case of this thing called false memory syndrome, where people are coming to realize that they have these memories of a life that they never lived, and they're trying to figure out why these memories are invading these people's minds. And then you also follow the perspective of a scientist who is trying to cure her mother's Alzheimer's disease with this thing called a memory chair that she's hoping will give her mother the ability to revisit old memories in her mind that were otherwise unattainable because of her disease. So those 2 perspectives combined, you kind of get this book that is all about memories and how they impact human society. I don't want to say anything else about the plot because it's always fun to go into a Blake Crouch novel totally blind. This does have a trope in it that I think you either love or hate in books, and I'm finding that I am leaning more towards the hate now instead of the love, because this particular trope, even though the idea of it I never like how it's executed. So even though that trope was present in this book, I think Blake Crouch still did a really good job of having a really thrilling, exciting, fast-paced adventure, but I wasn't a huge fan of this particular element that he brought in, and I'm purposely being vague. So I think that's kind of what hindered my enjoyment just a little bit, but I still love his style of writing. I love how fast-paced his books are. I love how easy it is to just get wrapped up in them, and how he constantly blows my mind. Like, Dark Matter will still definitely be my favorite of his. This is definitely not taking its spot anytime soon, but this is still very reminiscent of Dark Matter and had a lot of those elements that I loved in that book present in here as well. So this was still a ton of fun. It just wasn't a new favorite like I thought it would be. So that's kind of a bummer. The next book I read was Her Every Fear by Peter Swanson, which follows this woman named Kate who has had some trauma in her past that she's still trying to get over, and decides to do a house swap with one of her cousins. So she lives in London and decides to kind of try to overcome her tragedy. She's going to move to New York and take her cousin's apartment, and her cousin will take her apartment in London. So they do a house swap, and when that happens, Kate realizes that her neighbor, shortly after she moves in, is murdered, and she is trying to figure out who this murderer is. And so that's all I want to say about the summary of this book. Overall, this was pretty average for a thriller. It definitely was fun to read while you were reading it, but when you finish it, you're not really blown away. It's a little bit forgettable, and it kind of didn't have any like huge twists. Like, you could definitely predict the twists before they happened. So it didn't have any like huge twists that blew your mind or anything like that. But it was still fun to read. So I would recommend it, but there are definitely other books I would recommend before recommending this one. It's something where if you see a great deal on this book, pick it up, because you'll maybe have fun while you're reading it, but don't expect to be blown away or anything like that. I found it fairly forgettable, fairly average, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. I didn't hate it, I just didn't love it either. It's kind of one of those that falls in the middle, and I don't have a ton to say about it. And then something else that kind of didn't do much for me was The Queen's Rising by Rebecca Ross. I ended up also giving this one 3 stars. I feel like a 3-star book is the hardest book to talk about because it didn't do anything necessarily wrong. It just didn't do anything phenomenal either. So I just don't have a lot to say because it's kind of just like meh. So The Queen's Rising, it follows this woman who doesn't know who her father is, and her grandfather decides to take this girl to this home where basically all of the women in this home are being trained to become these what are called passions. And so in this world, there are 5 passions that you can kind of like specialize in. Like, for example, there's a passion of knowledge, a passion of music, passion of art, etc. So you specialize in one of those things, and then you basically get adopted at the end of it. And that passion is like your trade for the rest of your life. And I guess, I don't know. So this had some like good ideas in it. But at the end of the day, behind all of that like passion stuff, this is a pretty basic YA fantasy about a girl who has this kind of like hidden power that she's trying to utilize to overthrow a king. So it's like super generic when you take away all of the like passion stuff. So the direction this novel went was a little disappointing because it started off pretty promising, but it kind of fell into the traps of becoming very tropey and just kind of following the same formula that you read in a lot of young adult fantasies. So it's one of those things where if you've read a ton of young adult fantasy, I don't think this one's gonna stand out in any major way, just because once you just get oversaturated with this genre, it is really hard to stand out in it, especially if you don't have like outstanding characters or an outstanding world or something that's just so wonderful about your book. It's really hard to stand out in this genre nowadays because there's just so much of it. So this is not something that I would say like, go grab it tomorrow, but it's not bad. So oh, take that as you will, I guess. So those are the most recent 5 books I have read. Hopefully this helps you decide whether or not you want to pick any of these up. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And until next time.